Welcome Ada from Make a Difference Institute in Hong Kong, or at least that's the organization you're representing today. Welcome Mustafa. Welcome Felice, so nice to see you. Welcome Malika, also from Turkey, from the Young Guru Academy. And welcome Francis Peterson, or Professor Francis Peterson from the University of the Free State in South Africa. So let's just get to it, shall we? So we have more time for discussion and questions. I'm going to ask the first question to Felice and Francis. So young people today face many challenges, particularly unique challenges after the year we've just had, but also with migration and climate change and all of the economic challenges that have come from the last year, 5 years, 10 years. They have a challenging future ahead. But what we're so excited about and what we're so inspired about, particularly and through the conversations we've heard through the sister event, the Sixth Wayfinder, is that young people are not just responding to this by saying, look, we've got a really challenging time ahead and being negative. They're really finding the positives. They're really showing incredible ingenuity, energy, action against all of this adversity. There are lots of different approaches to tackling this kind of supportive work with young people. So my question to Felice and Francis is the organizations that you're representing on this panel here today could be described as more formal institutions or at least institutions that some people sometimes see as kind of top down. So I'm interested from both of your perspectives, how do we support the future generations who may be a little bit skeptical about working with organizations like yours? How can you and your organizations build trust and engage these young people who are slightly nervous about working with you? Maybe I'll start with Felice.
Hi, is my voice coming across clearly? Yeah, okay, good. So greetings, everybody. Well, we work in the field focused solely on the topic of employment. So there are a lot of young people very willing to be part of this organization and this effort. In very brief, what we do is take brand new university graduates, help them get their first jobs, which they're often really challenged in finding. 40% of new university graduates in Turkey are unemployed. And we help them get jobs. They're working full-time at NGOs in proper jobs, so finance and IT and HR and all the things that people don't really think about when they think about working with NGOs. And we pay their full salaries. We give them training, English language training, mentorship, all kinds of things. And then by the end of that year, 100% of them are finishing the program. 80% have a new job offer before the program even ends. And over 95% are working in their first job 3 months after the program. So really, there's not a whole lot of questioning happening on behalf of the young people, except, why can't we support more of them? Right now, we've only been able to put 95 people through the program and 55 are continuing now. It's really hard to scale these kinds of initiatives. I think involving young people, we've always been very conscious in involving people. The not for us, without us concept is really alive and well at Esas Social. So they're on our advisory boards. They have an alumni group. I think, so basically in summary, for future generations, we're looking at two things. Obviously, we need their voice and involvement. But, just the other day we were in a session with them and someone offered them like a free airline ticket or something. And they were like, yeah, no, actually, could you just give me an internship? I mean, they want jobs, right? And I think if we don't start figuring out ways to get more people engaged in meaningful employment, we're going to be really even more challenged with our future generations. And getting them involved in that process is also important.
Thank you, Felice. It's really, really grounded and just very practical approach. They need the jobs. Francis, can I go to you? You're welcome from South Africa. You're talking on behalf of a university institution today. So how can the universities, beyond the obvious, build trust and support these young people at this very difficult time?
All right. So from my perspective, Louise, universities and I'll probably say institutions of higher learning, they are normally institutions that are there for social change. And I believe that is the focus of universities. They are institutions that has to support social change. And there are many young people that actually entering these institutions. So the challenge, on the one hand, there's a challenge to bring this across, but on the other hand, it's also an immense privilege, I believe, that if you are in a university or an institution of higher learning, to engage with young people, to shape their thinking a bit, and also to help them and assist them to become change agents tomorrow and obviously for the future. Now, the question is, what would be the role of the academy in terms of providing that capable and creating that capable environment for young people to come to institutions and to learn and to pick up those necessary skills? So I think we need to, and this is what universities are supposed to do, is to create platforms for these young people also to aspire, to dream of a world that it is more diverse, more inclusive, and more equitable. And that in itself creates massive opportunities. So I think the role that the university needs to play, the university needs to show to what extent can I be indispensable as a university. And if you can say that I'm indispensable as a university, then your contribution would allow society to flourish. And there are many ways to do that. There are many ways to bring that across. And I think the pandemic that we had through COVID-19 have indicated that teaching and learning, that research, generation of new knowledge, that engaging with different societies, different components of society is immensely crucial and is and provide a value add. So the role that formal institutions would play would be to say, well, how do we bring those components of society into the university, communities, different sectors of the economy. And I want to stress the formal economy as well as the informal economy. How do you bring the formal curriculum and the co-curriculum to the university and effectively try to show to our young people that there's an intersection of different knowledge systems, and you learn from those intersections. You learn to create a certain amount of skills, to create also and develop and acquire that sort of thinking to be able to think across different needs and different knowledge systems. So I would say if we can capitalize on the intersection of those knowledge systems, work with a co-creation sort of notion of ability, then we can start to grapple and respond to the challenges of the global world, but also your local context. And I think that's really what the formal institutions as universities and institutions for higher learning are doing. And as I indicated, different institutions have different ways of doing it, but if we can bring that across, then I think we put that dream, that aspiration, their can-do attitude amongst and within our young people of today.
Thank you, Francis, for that. I'm going to kind of flip the table here and go to Malika and Mustafa, who are coming from less formal institutions, or could talk a little bit more about the bottom-up movement. So maybe we'll start with Malika. You know, you're working very much from the ground, and I'd love to know your perspective on why you think platforms for these young people are really important in helping them create the futures that they deserve.
Great question. I think I will flip the question to ask whose dreams you want to support. So do you want to support the dreams of adult people, or do you want to support the dreams of young people? So of course it's the generalization, but when you look at kids, their dreams are space scale. And when you look at adults, mainly their dreams are family scale, company scale, or let's say at most nation scale. But when you look at young people, especially the youth movements of the past couple of years, when you look at them, their dreams are world scale. So their dreams are bigger than themselves. So this is why the organization I'm working for, YGA, we exist to raise double-winged youth. And this is a metaphor we quite like when we say double-winged. On the one wing, young people who are conscious about the wicked problems of today. So they care about the communities, but this is not enough. And the second wing is that they are competent enough to solve those problems with technology. And a good example for that is one of the YGA startups. So we built Smart Cane. So it is a smart cane for visually impaired community. So if you think about the white cane that has been used for hundreds of years, it has never changed, you know. So look at how fast the technology is moving, but the white cane stayed the same. So YGA graduates developed the Smart Cane, which can connect to your mobile phones and gives the visually impaired community the freedom to get out there and, you know, explore explore freely. So this is a great example of a social impact-driven venture. And when you work with young people who have bigger dreams than themselves, and when you give them the chance to speak up, and when you give them the abilities to make change, then the results make everyone proud, So We Walk Smart Cane was selected as the invention of the year by Time magazine just 2 years ago, which I think is great news for all of us. And for YGA, every year, 50,000 high school and university students apply to be volunteers, which is another good news for all of us. Young people want to volunteer. They want to make change. So this is why we are helping them, or we are supporting their dreams rather than our dreams, let's say.
Thank you, Melike. Mustafa?
I would like to reflect from what Francis mentioned about the education and the institutions, but also Melike shared this white cane. Not only our institutions are designed for the problems of the 19th or 20th century, but also the tools for the social problems are designed for the 20th century. But we are facing very new, at least for our generation, unseen problems that we are facing in very volatile environment. So everything needs to change. The way we look to the problem, the way we look to the solutions. And what I say for this is youth is actually very on the SDG agenda. What I mean by the SDG agenda, actually, of course, it's owned by everyone. But back in 2012 and 2015, there was this worldwide survey going on all around the globe, which was My World Survey. So 8 million votes have been collected for the future that all generations are aiming for. It's the dream that Melike actually mentioned. What is the dream for our planet? 88% of the 8 million votes is actually coming from the 30 years and below, so young people. These 8 million votes is actually evolved into sustainable development goals. So it's not just the dark corridors of the experts or the consultants, but it's the very youth actually defined the agenda that we are actually following right now. And it is, again, not owned by the young people, but corporations, startups, local governments, central governments. That for us, ImageLab is a social innovation platform, but with ImageLab, we are closely working with young people. So we are listening them, we are hearing them, and we are working with them, not for them. This is actually our motto for our youth work. We are listening them. We are creating a space that traditional learning environment or the traditional institutions are not providing. It's not one person or one entity that knows all the information and spreads to the young mind, but no, everybody in a collective mind actually knows much bigger than what a teacher can actually know. So this is the notion that we are bringing with our youth work. Because if we listen to the field as a young youth worker who comes from the field for 10 years, it is crucial to listen young voices through whether it is a social innovation platform like we do, or whether it's a civil movement. But grassroots movements is actually, when added up, makes sense. So to answer to your questions, actually, making sense is only possible by hearing the dearest voices. Today, in the opening panel, Deniz, one of the panelists, young panelist from the university, who is a university student, mentioned that we need spaces that people can hear us. And actually, what we are trying to do with the local and national social innovation platform, we are trying to listen what young people actually give attention to the certain problem, whether it is an ecological problem, whether it's a inequality, whether it is financial problem, whether it is a social problem. So we need to listen them, but not just listening doesn't only work. So we need to transform all these notion, all these information from the local into the action. And action is only possible with creating a space, finding really important mentors, trainers, also the resource from the private sector, from the philanthropy, to create intersectoral innovation possible.
Thank you so much, Mustafa. And I think, your kind of Image's vision of that cross-sectoral approach is really, really well demonstrated, I think, on this panel, and is a perfect segue for me to move on to Ada, who is one of the most significant tri-sector leaders in Hong Kong, and I think in the social innovation movement globally. And you spent so much of your career working with young people, whether it's whatever capacity you've been working, whether it's a lawyer or a teacher or an entrepreneur or a local government politician. So Can you tell us a little bit about your approach to the way you work with young people, and in particular, reflecting on the comments from the other panels? You really bring that way of helping the top down and the bottom up to work together, the formal and the informal institutions, connect and collaborate. So could you tell us a little bit about your work in that and your perspective on the need for that tri-sector collaboration to build trust in particularly difficult environments? Ada, you're on mute.
How is that? Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for the invitation. Very happy to be a panelist. First of all, I think I echo all the other speakers in the sense that, yes, I think the world has changed tremendously. We have unseen problems, and whether as adults or as young people, we won't be able to understand, how this could be solved. So, but, in Asia, a lot of the people, especially adults, they do think that they know the answer to problems. And so the voices of young people are therefore ignored or sidelined. But I do hope that there could be, a co-creation approach in responding to unseen issues and unseen problems. We do need the creativity and innovative mindset of young people. They are digital natives. They can think of a problem from different angles and different perspectives. Obviously, we need the resources of adults. So I have been a connector, I would say, because I guess I'm sort of middle-aged and I'm old enough to talk to the adults, and then I can still work with the young people. What I try to do is I try to build trust, and the approach I use is a co-creative platform, which I call the social lab. So each time I pick an issue and I get adults involved, I get all kinds of stakeholders involved. Most importantly, I get young people involved. So let me just bring a very concrete example in tourism. As we all know, 2020, nobody's traveling. We cannot travel. There are lockdowns around the globe. This is unprecedented anywhere, and so tourism everywhere has sort of died down almost. Now, how do we reignite tourism, but to create a new kind of tourism that could be more sustainable, that could provide win-win situations for the major sites as well as for the residents, and not just for the consumers, not for the tourists. And how could we make sure that the tourists do not, trample on other people's properties and destroy our nature, and so on. There are many, many questions that to have a reset, to have a restart, we do need lots of new ideas. And so we created a local tourism lab, and surprisingly, we got the agreement of two government departments who said, yes, we are very interested in this. We are also looking for new ideas to respond to these new issues, and so they joined this social lab together with 20 plus young people, which we recruited through an open call just on Facebook. We say, hey, are you interested in improving, how tourism is designed? And so they all came together. And so now we have picked a few major sites, and we are, looking to design, very memorable experiences for the tourists while ensuring that, they are not just consumers, but they also give back to the community. And so, with this very concrete example, I hope you understand, the importance of co-creation. Now, obviously, is it difficult? Yes, it is extremely difficult because young people have different ideas, and sometimes the adults have other ideas. So my role as a facilitator, as a mediator, would be to try to align, their vision and try to see whether, they can come to, some consensus in what they do. And normally, because we use design thinking as an approach, people would agree to, using those ideas as different prototypes. And then, we can start testing those ideas together. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ada, for showing a very concrete example there. And just a reminder for the audience, I think there's a Q&A function. So if you have any questions for our panel, although it's a short amount of time, I'll make sure that we can have a couple of those at the end. I'm going to ask you all a question now, and please feel free just to respond to things others said that you find interesting or you want to comment on at the same time. But my question to you all, really building on Ada's point here, is where do we start? Is it just scaling up the things we're already doing? Or, where are those, how do we accelerate this work to support young people? Time is going so quickly. Things are changing faster than we can see, but we clearly still need to accelerate this kind of support and energy for change in young people. So maybe the question really is, where are those acupuncture points? What are the things that we can do or you can do in your institutions or from your positions where you think really can make the biggest amount of change most effectively and most quickly? And maybe that's just continuing to do what you already do. I'll go to Malika first. And as I said, the invitation is to comment on anything you've heard at the same time.
Sure, great. I think the concept that I have in mind here is there are 3 A's we quite like to discuss as a framework. So it is aspiration, ability, and attitude. So when you ask what we can do to accelerate this is the 4th A, by the way. But so the first one is aspiration. We think young people need to witness role models, right role models. And those role models could be from science, from business, from art, from any area, really. But models that are focusing on social impact and that are successful. So this is why we in YGA, we use this as a methodology, to increase the aspiration of young people, for them to aspire to be change makers. We are trying to show them role model change makers. So founders of the social impact ventures of YGA are role models that spend a lot of their time, precious time as being entrepreneurs with young people to kind of give back what they received. And the second one is ability. So even if they aspire to be change makers, young people still need to get the abilities like identifying opportunities or critical thinking or, just failing forward, experimenting their ideas. So for them to get those abilities in the field, we have programs called Global Impact Programs, and they start at the age of 12. So when you say, is it too early to be an entrepreneur at the age of 12? It is not with the technology we have right now. So, and the last one is really the attitude, because even if the young people aspire to be change makers and they have the ability to be the change makers, then you still need a positive attitude from their communities for the change makers. And I will give a cultural example here. It will need to be in Turkish, sorry. So in Turkish, we say icat çıkarma, which literally translates as don't invent. So if you have a culture that says to young people, don't invent, then you won't have change makers in the future. So this is why we have another initiative called Science Moment, which literally helps kids to invent with science kits. So I think all in all, those 3 A's guide our efforts. So aspiration, attitude, and ability to, accelerate change makers.
Louise, can I just jump in here?
Please.
I'm inspired. I'm so inspired what Young Guru Academy does just in terms of supporting entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs. And I think that I don't know how many people are in this community are following what's happening in finance, but if we're going to talk about acceleration, we really need to be talking about how we're going to finance and support more of these entrepreneurs to come to market. And particularly, that one example that she gave about the tool for blind, there's just a huge amount of inequality. It goes without saying, right? SDG 10, it's on everyone's agenda, but how do we actually address inequality? More importantly, how do we fund it? So, there's this popular notion of ESG, environmental social governance. It's on the agenda of everyone in finance right now. There's more money in the hands of young people and women than ever before because of generational and other transfers. There's a huge demand for the ESG investing opportunities, but just not enough of a supply, which is a miracle, right? And there's money for change, but we need the organizations that are going to supply it. And one of the biggest challenges is the environmental and the governance is so much easier to address, at least find initiatives. But for the S, the social, it's completely open to interpretation. But there's some initiatives in the world happening now that are trying to target that S and around the quality impact investing in particular. And so I think we have a lot of young people really ready to tackle inequality, really ready to take risks and, maybe not start their first job in a consulting firm, but, go ahead and try to start their own company and do something and find solutions. And so when we think about acceleration, that happens to be the term that the tech sector uses to support entrepreneurs, right? They create accelerators, they create incubators, places that grow things. And I think we can really do a lot more to unlock the finances, especially not grants necessarily, but investments that people are really hungry to be doing. You already know that I work for a foundation, also I do a bunch of things, but one of them is the Empower Emerging Markets Foundation, which funds in emerging market countries. And there are just many, and we fund only youth development issues. And there's just so much opportunity, especially in emerging market countries. So I just wanted to highlight that I think acceleration is going to come through game-changing stuff, especially when it comes to financing solutions. Thanks.
Thank you, Felice. Ada, did you want to comment on that?
Okay.
Oh, Francis, go ahead.
Yes. So I totally agree with Malaika and Felice in terms of their contribution. I think the acceleration, there's another component in part of acceleration, and that is collaboration. Because I think there's such a lot of learning from one another, and we sometimes try to reinvent the wheel, where we can just share things. So that's the one point that I want to make. But there's a nice word that I often use, probably not that often, but I like to use it, is fortitude. And fortitude is the manner in which collective energy and wisdom of a people, a group, are harnessed on the basis of what they do or can do that is right. And I believe that this generation that we're sitting with now have much fortitude. Now, so the energy is there. How do you then realize that? So I think what Felice have said is brilliant, and also Malaika, but I think the collaboration, how do we pull together to let it work, is for me quite important. The challenges are there, the opportunities are there, the skill sets, the education, and that is what I've said earlier, we as social institutions, universities need to provide. That's there as well. And if you then could provide the environment, which is collaboration, any other component that would accelerate it, finance is one of that, but it's also for me that network. Young people are looking for that. They're looking for more people to engage with, different skills that comes in. And I think when Ada talk about design thinking, it is just where different skills get together, different angles of how questions, how issues are being tackled. It's just such a rich opportunity that is existing. We've got design thinking, we've got collaboration, we've got co-creation, we've got networks, we've got challenges that are out there, and we've got the fortitude amongst our youth. I think the world can't ask for better. So for me, it is just what are we doing to be able to ensure that the youth are going in the right direction. And I think it's important that our roles that we should be playing should be not only a supportive role, but it's also a role to listen and to hear what the young people are asking, because there's a difference between those two, and then try to respond. But I'm very optimistic. I think we've got a generation here that is going to be doing fantastically, and we just have to make sure that we're part of that, create the environment, and then respond to what I would say the life and the welfare of our people in a prosperous and fairer world. So that I thought I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Maybe if I can jump in here.
Yeah.
I want to respond to a couple of points.
Yeah.
At the Make a Difference Institute, we want to nurture change makers as well. So when Malika said, can a 12-year-old be a change maker? I mean, this is a resounding yes from us in Hong Kong. Although I have not worked with 12 years old before, but I have seen how younger people have big dreams these days. I mean, look at the Swedish Greta Thunberg. She's a role model for many, many young people. So, what could we do? What could we, as adults do? I have been advocating a new kind of youth-adult partnership lately. And what does this youth-adult partnership look like? I think it looks, well, first of all, we have to not just trust, but to believe that young people have the capability to come up with new ideas. Then, we have to facilitate, that process that they could incubate the new ideas. So at the Make a Difference Institute, we have been collaborating with a foundation, and the foundation is giving each team not very much like $2,000 US per team. They are young. I mean, they can be university students or even high school students. They could pick a social problem or an environmental issue, and they say, we have a new idea to respond to those problems. And we, have an incubation program for around 3 to 6 months, and we give them the $2,000 US for them to come up with the different prototypes and to really inculcate a very experimental spirit and not to be afraid of failure. At the end, we showcase what they could do and what they couldn't do yet. And so I think, if more of us can do this sort of thing, then, it's a very new and trusting kind of youth adult partnership. And I hope that this is the way to go.
Ada, I can assure you that 5 years old can also make some change. I guess some of our participants know that Jeru Bilmora from Aflatun, who is a Ashoka Fellow, who started Aflatun and Aflatin. So all these 5 years old, 6 years old are learning their personal finance, and they are impacting their family's finances. So it shows how social innovation or social entrepreneurship can bridge and find certain solutions to the certain problems. An answer to your question, Luis, I will resonate with what Phyllis mentioned. So we are agree on that youth is owner of the problems and the global issues and the sustainable development goal agenda. So what we are doing is with three-sector approach or with ImageLab or with double-winged approach, we are creating this partnership, this wonderful partnership for young people to match with adults, mentors, trainers, etc. And we are creating a space to hear them, to listen them, but not only hear them, but a place for them to create an action, start a change. But what is missing here is youth leadership. And to make them a leader, to make them lead, there's a generational wealth gap. So generational gap is actually defined as differences in mindset, values, skills in the different generation. But there is a huge generational wealth gap, which will probably filled. But how? That is the question. Whether it is the impact investment, whether it is the relocation of new wealth owners to the investing to the social problems. Phyllis is working in a wonderful area. Youth employment is a global issue, not just in Turkey, but in many other countries, in MENA region particularly. But there is also a newly framed problem, which they are not in the employment, but not also in the education needs. So there's a bulging number of young people. And these are the problems that none of our previous generation has actually tackled. So this transformation of wealth from previous generation to this generation to create impactful, socially impactful, environmental impactful solutions is crucial, and that's what will accelerate. Because there's no single approach to solve all the problems. But one of the acceleration points, I guess, will be in the financial gap when it is filled. Framing from the Stanford University's definition or drivers of the social innovation, they define what drives social innovation is actually the exchange of ideas and values. And we are all here creating this space to exchange these ideas. We certainly do at ImageLab. We also certainly do with this Image Summit, and there will be youth opening after the end of this summit. So you will hear wonderful harvest report from our wonderful young people. But also, what drives the social innovation is the shift in roles and responsibilities, and it is happening. This is what Phyllis actually is working for. This is what Ada, this is what Francis, this is what Melika is actually working for. So there's no problem with that. But again, the third driver is going to resonate with what I'm saying, is the integration of the private capital, philanthropy, and public support. So this shift is probably going to accelerate new change makers to populate the world with better solutions, better economy, better in terms of environment and the society. So acceleration needs to happen in the wealth transfer.
Mustafa, thank you for that. Those three drivers at the end is a really great key message that kind of summarizes a lot of the conversations we've had in our conversation. There was a comment from the panel that a comment from the audience that I just wanted to read out to the panel because I really appreciate. The person who wrote it said, "I'm only 22. I like to think that I'm young." Smiley face. To your question, of course there is a trust issue, which is really big between young people and old people. Old people just don't trust the young. And that's the experience that I have. Just because they're older than us doesn't mean they're better, essentially. And then there was another question, which I'd like to ask you as a final question. And you can really just give me a kind of yes, no answer and any just very quick comment you have on it in the last 3 minutes of our session. Somebody asked about reverse mentoring. Can reverse mentoring create new opportunities for young people? Can that serve to solve some of our society's biggest challenges? And my question to you on that is would you do it? Are you willing to do it? Will you have a young person mentoring you? And we'll just go Feliz, Malika, Francis, Ada, and then Feliz.
Absolutely, especially in high power distant cultures like Turkish culture, which absolutely look at young people as should be obedient and just listen and just do what they're told and so on. It's because of the culture. It's not like that in every culture. A lot of young people have a lot of other opportunities that Turkish young people do not because of the culture. So yes, I think it's particularly important in our culture if we're open to it.
Fantastic. And perhaps we could do some global reverse mentoring too. Malika.
Yeah, well, actually, I'm gonna say I have kind of like hundreds of them right now in YGA. All the YGA volunteers are my mentors, so I totally recommend it. Whoever wants to grow.
Absolutely, thank you so much, Francis. I hope none of you will say no.
No, I obviously would all say yes, and I think the driving force that young people have, and when I mentioned about knowledge systems, I think they also have knowledge, a different type of knowledge, because it's probably not that mature, but it's fresh and different. And if we believe in co-creation, then nobody should be arguing against reverse mentoring. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Francis. Ada, I know you do it already.
I think Chinese culture is worse than Turkish culture in the sense that we all have to respect those people who are more senior than us. But I do believe in reverse mentoring. In fact, I do that all the time. Young people talk to me and they kind of mentor me. Well, yeah, in a way they do. But honestly, I'm the weird one in Hong Kong. And so I do hope that I can advocate this and try to really influence my peers to do more of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Ada. And the final word to Mustafa is one of our hosts from the director of the Image team. So Mustafa, any final thoughts you'd like to share?
First of all, response to Ada, we love weird people, so that's totally okay for us. Secondly, that's absolute yes. I'm fortunate enough to work with young-led organization. With our most of our team members are young, and also we are working with 1,000 young people from the Turkey. So there is always a learning environment. But this learning environment is not just for us, but also for our mentors, for our trainers. Because earlier in the morning sessions, one of the panelists mentioned that not our bodies is actually getting old, but our diploma, our learning is also getting old. If we are talking about learning all the time, lifelong learning, I think we should learn a lot from the young people. We can learn a lot, and we are learning a lot. So reverse mentoring is a part of 21st century learning experience.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much to you all. I think from a SIX perspective, the Social Innovation Exchange is an organization, and the work we do around social innovation is all about having people ask us different kinds of questions, bringing people together from very different backgrounds and experiences, and that means young and old, but also incredible people like all of you. So thank you to Image team for inviting us to be part of this summit. Thank you, all of you. It's really difficult to have an inspiring conversation with so many brilliant minds in just 15 minutes. But I think I've learned lots. I've really enjoyed talking to all of you, and I appreciate you joining us, whether it's the beginning of the day, the end of the day, or anywhere in between. Thank you all for your time and your energy and your insights. It's been a pleasure. Take care and have a great day.
Thank you.
Enjoy the
Thank you, Louise.